The boathouse by the quiet lake. The boathouse had stood at the north end of Alder Lake for nearly 70 years, a long, low building of grey, weathered wood and a tin roof gone soft with rust in places. And for the last 18 of those years, it had belonged, in every way that mattered, to a man named Otis. He didn't own the deed outright. That technically belonged to the small lakeside resort further up the shore, but he had tended the place so faithfully for so long that everyone in town, resort owners included, simply thought of it as Otis's boathouse, the way a person thinks of an old dog as belonging to whoever feeds it, regardless of whose name might be on any paper. Today had carried the particular heavy stillness of an afternoon building toward rain, the lake lying flat and silver grey beneath a sky that seemed to be gathering its breath before letting go, and Otis had felt it coming the way he always did, some old instinct settled deep in his knees and shoulders after decades spent close to weather. He'd spent the morning readying the boathouse for it without quite admitting to himself what he was doing, checking the canoes were properly racked and covered, coiling loose rope back onto its pegs, setting a kettle to warm on the little wood stove in the back corner that served as his office, workshop and occasional bedroom all at once. By early afternoon, the first drops had begun tapping against the tin roof overhead, hesitant and scattered at first, and Otis paused in the middle of sanding down an old canoe paddle to listen, feeling the same small anticipatory lift he always felt at the start of a proper rain. The boathouse around him held its usual comfortable platter, canoes and rowboats racked along both long walls, paddles hung in careful rows, coils of rope and life vests, and the accumulated small tools of 70 years of lake life, arranged with a logic only Otis fully understood anymore. The rain thickened steadily through the early afternoon, settling into a full, unhurried rhythm against the tin roof, and Otis moved through his usual rainy day rituals with the same practiced calm he always carried on days like this, turning up the little transistor radio on his workbench to its familiar low murmur, lighting the oil lamp that hung above his workbench, even though the boathouse still had a few good hours of grey daylight left, setting a second mug by the kettle, more out of habit than any real expectation that someone might actually come by in this weather. The old lake had gone the colour of pewter under the darkening sky, its surface stitched all over with the widening rings of individual raindrops, and Otis stood a moment at the wide open doorway, watching it, feeling the particular hush that always settled over the water in the first real minutes of a rain, birds gone quiet, the far shore softening into a grey smudge behind curtains of falling water. He'd watched this exact transformation happen more times than he could count, and it had never once failed to still something restless in his chest. He went back to his paddle, sanding it slowly in long, even strokes, letting the rain's steady percussion against the tin roof set the pace for his afternoon, rather than the other way around. It was old work, this. The paddle had belonged to a summer camper decades ago, left behind and forgotten, and Otis had taken to restoring old abandoned gear in his slower hours, sanding and oiling and re-varnishing things other people had given up on, less because the lake needed more paddles, and more because his hands seemed to need the steady, patient work of bringing something old back to usefulness. The kettle began its low building whistle a little after 2, and Otis set the paddle aside to make his tea, strong and dark the way he always took it, carrying the chipped enamel mug back to the old rocking chair by the open doorway, where he could watch the rain and the lake together. The chair had come with the boathouse, older even than his 18 years here, its rockers worn smooth on the underside from decades of exactly this same use, and Otis settled into it now with the particular ease of a body that had long ago memorized every curve and give of the wood. This, he often thought on afternoons exactly like this one, was the whole reason he'd never once regretted the strange, meandering path that had brought him here nearly 2 decades ago. A young man, restless and uncertain, stopping at the lake for what he'd meant to be a single season of quiet, and finding instead something that felt almost immediately like exactly where he was supposed to be. There was something deeply satisfying at tending a small patch of lakeshore faithfully season after season, watching the same families return summer after summer, their children growing up paddling the same battered canoes he kept in careful repair. It was while searching the workbench's lower drawer for a fresh rag that Otis's hand brushed against something tucked far back in the corner, behind a coil of old fishing line he hadn't touched in years. He drew it out carefully and found a small, weathered logbook, its cover soft with age and faintly water-stained at one corner, clearly belonging to whoever had kept the boathouse before him, a man named Cutler, who had died the same year Otis first arrived, leaving the place to sit empty and half forgotten for nearly a full season before Otis had taken it over. He opened it carefully, settling back into the rocking chair while the rain kept its steady rhythm against the roof, and found Cutler's blocky, practical handwriting filling page after page, notes on canoe repairs and fish counts and small weather observations, each entry brief but oddly companionable, the voice of a man who had clearly loved this small stretch of shoreline every bit as much as Otis had come to. Near the very back, tucked between 2 blank pages, Otis found a folded note in the same blocky hand, addressed simply, "To whoever takes this place after me." He unfolded it slowly, feeling something warm and unexpected rise in his chest, and read Cutler's words for what he realized with a small jolt must have been the very first time in all these years, a short, plainly written note explaining that the boathouse had never really been about the boats themselves, not entirely, but about giving people somewhere quiet to come sit a while with the water, whatever else was going on in their lives that particular season. "The rain days are the best days here," the note ended. "Nobody's in a hurry to get out on the water. They just want somewhere dry to listen to it fall. Let them stay as long as they like." Otis read it twice, throat tight, before folding it carefully back along its original crease and tucking it into his shirt pocket, deciding it would stay there now, close at hand, on every rainy afternoon from here forward. The afternoon wore on unhurried, the rain never once threatening to let up, and true to Cutler's old note, a few visitors did eventually make their way down from the resort despite the weather, ducking gratefully in under the boathouse's wide overhanging roof, shaking off wet jackets, in no particular hurry to actually get out on the water. There was the Hendricks family, regulars for going on 6 summers now, the 2 kids immediately settling onto the old bench along the back wall to watch the rain fall across the lake, while their parents chatted easily with Otis about nothing much at all, the state of the resort's new dock, whether the fish had been biting, how much longer the rain looked like it might last. Otis made a second pot of tea for them, unasked, and pulled out an old deck of cards from the workbench drawer for the kids who fell immediately into some elaborate game of their own invention, laughter mixing easily with the rain's steady percussion against the tin roof overhead. This, he thought, watching them, was exactly the kind of afternoon Cutler's note had described, a boathouse full of people with nowhere urgent to be, content simply to sit and listen to the water fall. A young couple came in sometime around 3, soaked through despite an umbrella clearly not built for this kind of downpour, laughing at their own bad luck as they ducked beneath the roofline. Otis recognized them vaguely from the week before, newlyweds staying at one of the lakeside cabins, still discovering which corners of the resort felt most like their own. He waved them toward the bench beside the Hendricks kids, poured tea without being asked, and watched with quiet satisfaction as they settled in no apparent hurry to brave the rain anytime soon. The boathouse filled slowly but steadily through the afternoon, never crowded exactly, but pleasantly full of quiet movement and low conversation, the gentle murmur of the transistor radio mixing easily with the rain's steady percussion against the tin roof, and the occasional soft splash of a fish rising somewhere out on the gray water beyond the open doorway. Otis moved between his workbench and his visitors with the unhurried efficiency of someone entirely at home in his small lakeside kingdom, refilling mugs, trading a few quiet words, pausing here and there to point out some passing detail on the water worth noticing. While digging through an old crate of spare oarlocks for a customer who'd mentioned a loose one on her canoe, Otis's fingers found instead a small, faded photograph tucked behind a stack of spare life vests, curling slightly at the corners, clearly forgotten there for years. It showed Cutler, decades younger, standing at this same wide doorway on some long-ago rainy afternoon, cap pushed back, laughing at whoever held the camera, the boathouse behind him recognizably the same, and yet subtly different. Different canoes racked along the walls, but the same warm, crowded, rain-soaked feeling filling every corner of the frame. On the back, in the same blocky hand as the logbook, someone had written only, "Best kind of day, full house, bad weather, nobody in any hurry at all." Otis propped the photograph against the old oil lamp on his workbench, facing out into the room, deciding it belonged there now among the boathouse's other small, quiet treasures, and went back to his work with a private smile, feeling, not for the first time this particular afternoon, the strange comfort of standing in exactly the same doorway Cutler once had, on a day that felt, in all the ways that mattered, remarkably similar. Sometime around 5, the rain thickened further still, arriving in earnest now, drumming hard against the tin roof with a fuller, more insistent rhythm than it had carried all afternoon. A low roll of thunder moved somewhere across the lake, distant but unmistakable, rolling long and slow across the open water the way thunder always seemed to out here, stretched out by the distance it had to travel over so much flat, unobstructed surface. The wind picked up outside, driving the rain in long grey sheets across the lake's now choppy surface, and a fresh gust sent a fine spray hissing in through the boathouse's open doorway, prompting Otis to finally swing the wide wooden doors most of the way closed, leaving just enough gap for the grey light and the sound of the rain to keep drifting in. The Hendricks kids abandoned their card game briefly to watch a particularly bright flash of lightning split the sky out over the far shore, counting the seconds until the thunder rolled in after it, the way children always seem to, delighted rather than frightened by the storm's growing drama. "Best get you all back up to the cabins before it gets worse," Mr. Hendricks said eventually, though nobody moved with any particular urgency, and Otis found himself, not for the first time this particular afternoon, quietly grateful that Cutler's philosophy about rainy days seemed to have settled itself into the whole resort's unhurried rhythm over the years, storm or no storm. The families gathered their things slowly, unhurried despite the thickening rain outside, and made their goodbyes with the easy warmth of people who fully expected to be back again soon, storm or shine. Otis lent the young couple a spare umbrella from the rack by the door, waved off their offer to return it, and watched them all make their way up the wet path toward the cabins, laughter and the occasional delighted shriek at the rain drifting back to him even after they'd disappeared from sight around the bend. Alone again, Otis stood a moment in the wide doorway, watching the storm properly settle in over the lake, the water gone dark and restless under the low sky, whitecaps beginning to show here and there where the wind found enough open water to work with. He had seen worse storms than this one plenty of times over 18 years, and felt none of the concern a newer keeper might have carried, only the familiar, almost companionable respect of someone who had long ago made his peace with living this close to weather. He kept the boathouse a little later than strictly necessary, official closing time coming and going without much ceremony, since there was always the chance some straggler might come down from the cabins for shelter before the worst of it passed, and Otis had long ago decided that being available on a night like this mattered more than any strict schedule. He busied himself with small evening tasks, checking the canoe racks one more time, banking the little wood stove to burn low and steady through whatever remained of the evening, refilling the oil lamp before the light properly failed. No one else came in the end, the resort's guests apparently having settled in for the evening at their own cabins, and Otis found himself, a little after 7, alone with the storm and the lake and the old rocking chair, exactly the way most of his evenings here eventually wound down, regardless of how full or quiet the afternoon before them had been. He settled into the rocking chair with a fresh mug of tea, Cutler's logbook resting on his knee, and read on for a while further by the low glow of the oil lamp, the storm's steady drumming against the tin roof providing a fitting soundtrack to entries written, he now realized, on nights very much like this one. Cutler's practical notes gave way here and there to small, unguarded observations, a particularly fine sunset over the water, a family he'd clearly grown fond of over their many summers of visits, a brief entry, undated, that simply read, "Rain again tonight, lake's the color of an old nickel, wouldn't trade this spot for anywhere else on earth." Otis read that last line twice, feeling something settle warmly in his chest, some quiet sense of belonging to a much longer story than his own 18 years could ever fully account for. He closed the logbook gently and set it on the workbench beside Cutler's photograph, deciding he would add an entry of his own before the night was through, though the words for it hadn't quite arrived yet. Reaching into the workbench's lower drawer for a fresh notebook of his own, his hand found instead a small tin box he hadn't opened in years, tucked into the very back corner behind a coil of spare rope. Inside, he found a handful of old fishing lures, a tarnished pocket knife, and a short, handwritten card in Cutler's blocky hand, titled simply "Storm Tea." The ingredients listed in a careful column, mostly just strong black tea and a generous helping of honey, though the instructions carried an odd specificity that made Otis smile. "Steep it twice as long as you think you should," the card read. "Storms make people impatient. The tea doesn't have to be." Otis set the card carefully beside the logbook, deciding it belonged there now, close at hand, a small, certain thing to guide him through every storm tea evening from here forward, and settled back into the rocking chair with his own mug, already steeped, he realized with a small laugh, exactly twice as long as he usually bothered. The storm outside showed no sign of easing as the evening wore fully into night, the wind picking up occasionally to drive fresh sheets of rain against the tin roof, the lake beyond the mostly closed doors gone entirely invisible now in the full dark, its presence marked only by the low, steady sound of waves finding the shore somewhere close by. Otis finished his tea slowly, refilling it once from the kettle, and let his thoughts wander the way they always did on nights like this, unhurried, drifting easily between memory and simple present comfort. He thought of Cutler, gone now for 18 years, and found that the odd, second-hand grief of missing a man he'd never actually met had settled, over time, into something gentler than it might have been, less a sharp absence and more a kind of ongoing presence, felt most clearly in exactly moments like this one. Tea in hand, rain against the roof, the whole small boathouse humming quietly with the accumulated warmth of everyone who had ever ducked in out of a storm to sit a while with the water. He thought, too, of his own eventual successor, years or decades from now perhaps, finding this same logbook tucked behind some future version of the spare rope, adding their own careful notes in the margins, leaving their own folded note near the back for whoever came next. The thought didn't feel sad so much as it felt right, part of some much longer, gentler story that the boathouse itself seemed to be quietly telling, one rainy evening at a time. Eventually, tea finished and the evening's last small satisfactions properly settled, Otis rose to prepare for sleep, moving through the familiar small tasks of the boathouse's back corner with the same unhurried care he carried through everything else on nights like this. The little cot that served as his bed folded out easily from its spot against the back wall, worn soft from years of exactly these nights, and he banked the wood stove low, arranging the logs to burn slow and steady through what remained of the storm. He set the logbook, the small storm tea card, and Cutler's old photograph carefully on the crate that served as his bedside table, and climbed into the cot with the rain's steady rhythm filling the small dark room, drumming against the tin roof directly above him in a sound he had long ago stopped finding anything but deeply comforting. The heavier wool blanket at the foot of the cot came up easily against the evening's damp chill, and he pulled it snug, listening. He lay a while listening, the way he always did on nights exactly like this one, to the rain against the roof, to the old boathouse's familiar creaks as it settled around him, to the lake's steady, endless rhythm finding the shore somewhere close beyond the mostly closed doors. The canoes hung patient and quiet along both walls, the paddle he'd been sanding all afternoon, resting half-finished on the workbench, waiting for morning the way everything in the boathouse always seemed to, patient and unhurried, the way it had been for 70 years before he'd ever arrived himself. The mind does a curious thing on the edge of sleep, especially after a long, full day spent close to water. It stops sorting so carefully between what is remembered and what is only imagined, and lets the two drift together into something softer than either. Otis lay with eyes closed, not quite asleep, thoughts moving without any real steering, the way a canoe drifts once you've shipped the paddle, carried along by whatever current happened to be running beneath it. He thought he heard, very faintly beneath the rain, Cutler's voice, not words exactly, just the warm, practical cadence of a man who'd clearly loved this same small stretch of shoreline, patient and unhurried, the specific tone reserved for teaching someone the parts of the work that never quite made it into any logbook. He thought of the photograph propped against the oil lamp, Cutler, decades younger, laughing at this same wide doorway on some long-ago rainy afternoon, and in his half-dream the two evenings seemed to blur gently together, Cutler's crowded, storm-soaked boathouse folding easily into his own, as though the same quiet lakeside watch had simply been passing, uninterrupted, across all these years. The wind moved against the tin roof, and in his drifting mind it became, briefly, the sound of children's laughter from the card game earlier that afternoon, before he remembered, in the loose logic of half-sleep, that the Hendricks kids were tucked safely into their cabin by now, that the sound was only wind, only rain, only the old building settling into its own long night, the same as he was settling into his. Somewhere beyond the mostly closed doors, he imagined he could feel the whole dark lake breathing gently around him, full of the accumulated warmth of everyone who had sheltered inside the boathouse that day. The Hendricks family's card game, the young couple's borrowed umbrella, all of it settled now into the old wood and tin the way good days always seemed to, and Otis felt himself smile faintly in the dark, eyes still closed, feeling entirely, weightlessly content. Tomorrow existed only in the vaguest terms now, the canoes that would need checking, the paddle that would need finishing, whatever weather the morning happened to bring, rain or shine, quiet or full. None of it pulled at him the way tasks so often did on ordinary days, demanding speed, demanding urgency. Tonight, everything could simply wait its turn, unhurried, the way the rain was unhurried, the way the lake itself had always been unhurried, patient through 18 years and 70 more before that, waiting faithfully for whoever needed somewhere dry to sit out their particular storm. The rain went on. The old boathouse held, the way it had always held, through this storm and every storm before it, and somewhere beneath all that steady sound, Otis's breathing slowed further still, and further, until it too had settled fully into the storm's own patient rhythm, indistinguishable from the rest. Later, though later meant very little on a night like this, stretched and formless as it was, the rain eased by slow degrees, its steady percussion softening to something closer to a whisper against the tin roof, gentle now, unhurried, as though the storm itself had simply grown tired and settled in to rest alongside everyone it had passed over that night. Outside, the lake lay dark and calm again beyond the boathouse doors, the wind's earlier urgency reduced now to a soft, occasional breath, moving across water gone still and glassy under a sky still layered with cloud. The canoes hung patient in their racks, the old rocking chair sat empty by the doorway, the logbook and the small storm tea card waited quietly on their crate, ready for whoever needed them next, tonight or years from now. Otis slept the particular deep, dreamless sleep that only comes after a long, full day spent close to water and good company, the kind of sleep the body simply surrenders to, without negotiation, without the usual restless surfacing that so often interrupts an ordinary night. His breathing was slow and even, one hand resting near the small tin box on the crate beside him, the wool blanket drawn up snug against the last of the storm's lingering chill. If he dreamed, the dreams left no mark on his sleeping face, no furrow of worry, no small restless movement, only the occasional soft exhale, the occasional shift of a shoulder settling deeper into the thin cot pillow, the unmistakable stillness of someone entirely, thoroughly at rest after a day well spent. The old boathouse, for its part, seemed to settle, too, its familiar creaks growing quieter as the night wore fully into its deepest hours, the rain outside continuing its gentle, unhurried rhythm against the tin roof, patient and constant, asking nothing of the sleeping lake below, except that it simply let the water fall. Somewhere out across the water, a loon called once, low and haunting, and received no answer, and did not seem to mind, settling into its own long wait for morning the same as everyone else along that quiet shore. Toward dawn, the rain thinned at last to something barely more than mist, drifting low across the lake's calm surface rather than falling from any clear direction, and the light that crept up over the far tree line came the color of a dove's wing, pale and soft-edged, unhurried in the way all light seems to be after a long night of storm.
Otis woke slowly, the way mornings after a good rain always seem to arrive, without any sharp edge to the transition, simply drifting up out of sleep the way sleep itself had arrived hours before, layer by gentle layer. For a while he lay still, listening to the hush that had replaced the night's noise. No more wind against the roof, no more thunder rolling across the water, only the faint, companionable drip of rainwater finding its way off the tin eaves outside, and beneath it, somewhere close, the small industrious chatter of a chickadee that apparently had decided the storm was over long before the sky had quite agreed.
He rose without hurrying, dressed simply, and swung the wide wooden doors fully open at last. The smell of yesterday's rain still lingering thick and sweet in the cool morning air, mixing now with the clean mineral scent of the calming lake as it stretched out silver and still toward the far shore. The world outside looked washed entirely clean, every leaf and blade of grass beaded with water, the lake's surface catching the pale early light in 1,000 small scattered points, the far shoreline sharp and clear now after the storm's blurring rain had passed on through overnight. A few early risers moved along the resort path, nodding a familiar good morning as they passed the boathouse's freshly opened doors, and Otis nodded back, feeling the particular satisfaction of a keeper standing at the threshold of his own small lakeside kingdom, ready once again for whatever the day happened to bring. He finished sanding the old paddle with the same unhurried care he'd carried into it the day before, the little transistor radio working through its familiar low murmur behind him, and propped Cutler's old photograph up on the workbench where it would stay from now on, facing out into the room, keeping its own quiet watch over whoever came through the doors next. The Hendricks kids were down at the shore first, running ahead of their parents to peer eagerly into the boathouse, already asking whether the canoes might be dry enough to take out later that morning, and Otis laughed, promising he'd have everything ready by the time they finished breakfast, the way he always did. The way, he suspected, Cutler had promised the very same thing to families very much like theirs, summers and summers before. "Good rain last night," Mr. Hendricks said, ambling down a few minutes behind his children, more observation than conversation, and Otis smiled, one hand resting briefly over the small storm tea card in his shirt pocket. "The best kind," he agreed, and meant it entirely, already looking forward in some small, unhurried corner of his mind to whichever storm happened to roll through next, and all the quiet, ordinary good it would surely bring with it. That, he thought, checking the canoe racks one more unhurried time before the morning's small crowd began properly arriving, was really all the boathouse had ever asked of him: to keep the doors open, to keep the tea steeped a little longer than seemed strictly necessary, to let people stay exactly as long as they needed, storm or shine, and trust that the rain, whenever it came, would bring exactly the right people in out of it. Outside, the last of the morning mist lifted slowly off the lake's calm surface, and somewhere across the water a fish rose, sending a slow ring rippling outward toward the shore, and the boathouse, waiting patiently as it always had, opened itself up once more to whatever the weather chose to bring, warm and unhurried, and exactly as full in its own quiet way as it needed to be. Otis stood a while longer in the wide open doorway, watching the mist thin and lift over the water, listening to the Hendricks kids' bright chatter drift back down from the cabin path, and felt, standing there, the particular contentment that only ever arrived on mornings exactly like this one. the whole quiet lake stretched out before him, patient and calm, and entirely his to tend for one more good season. He thought, not for the first time, that Cutler had been right about nearly everything worth being right about, and that some inheritances had very little to do with deeds or paperwork at all, and everything to do with simply loving a place enough to keep its doors open, rain or shine, for however many more years the lake cared to have him. The end.